What's good, everybody? It's Robo back for another video, and today I've got my college football week 1 picks. Again, it's so good to be back for a new season of college football. Week 1 is a loaded slate of games as every FBS team is in action, but before we get into those games, let me go ahead and recap how week 0 went. Week 0 was not the greatest for me across the 4 games, going 1-3 against the spread. A few big-time dud performances, which I guess could have been expected as it's the first game of the season, but man, did FSU look awful, and SMU played one of their worst games I've seen in years. Nearly falling to Nevada on the road. Overall, underdogs went 4-0 against the spread last week, so let's see if that trend continues in week 1 with a much larger slate of games at hand. So let's go ahead and get started with these games. Rutgers and Howard kick off the first game of the week Thursday night from Piscataway, and this line seems a bit reactionary from the news of Muhammad Toure being out for the season, along with Tyreen Powell out, as I expect this to be a bit higher into the 40s. This is a very experienced Rutgers team with a ton of returning talent on defense and a really strong run game. Howard won't be in this game long at all unless Kelly McManus is giving the ball away. I like Rutgers to dominate defensively in this game, 42-3. Number 24, NC State hosts Western Carolina to open the season, and I'm thinking this spread opens up kind of light too. Maybe it'll take time for this offense to mesh, but Grayson McCall has a lot of college experience at quarterback, and KC Concepcion should be the unguardable player in this game. We should see a big day from McCall to grow that camaraderie as a unit, so I like NC State big, 48-10. Arkansas opens up the year against Arkansas Pine Bluff. This is obviously an incredibly one-sided matchup, but my read on the game is that the spread is a bit high. Besides I have some serious questions about the receiver room at Arkansas, and I think with Taylor Green's rushing ability, as well as Jaquindon Jackson, they'll pound the rock and run all over Pine Bluff, which won't allow them to score enough to cover, especially if they give up any points late. I've got the Razorbacks winning this one 45-6. Number 11, Missouri hosts Murray State Thursday with another deservingly massive spread to cover. They've got the talent to put up 50+ in this game, but a new stable of running backs and a few new starters in the O-line and the defense. It wouldn't shock me if they handled this game early and work on some things throughout the game. I think they'll just get near the spread, but 48 is just a lot for a team I don't necessarily see as a true national title contender. I'm going to go 49-6 for a final score. North Carolina at Minnesota could be a really underrated game Thursday night. The line's moved a bit as I've heard some rumors Darius Taylor and Daniel Jackson are banged up, but even prior to that, I was still leaning towards UNC winning this game. I think Minnesota improved offensively this offseason with Brosmer coming in, but UNC's defense could be really strong this season. They'll need everybody healthy to win this game, in my opinion, and I just don't think they're the better team here. Give me UNC 27-20 on the road. Prime time and the Buffaloes kick off 2024 against FCS powerhouse North Dakota State, who bring legitimate upside potential to town with a very strong team. Personally, my expectations for Colorado this season are pretty low, but I do think they do survive this game, as I just think they just have better talent across the board and will not be overlooking this team whatsoever. With a new, slightly improved offensive line unit, Shadur has the talent and the weapons to will the offense down the field and take over this game. And North Dakota State does look a bit weaker than the teams of the past, especially defensively. Give me the Buffs close though, 31-24. Coastal Carolina and Jacksonville State are two very evenly matched teams entering the year on both offense and defense. Jacksonville State's biggest strength is a run game behind a very solid offensive line, and Coastal Carolina will take advantage of Ethan Vasco's talent as a passer, but with a much different receiving core compared to last season. Because neither is particularly strong, I think that bodes well for Jacksonville State being able to have more success controlling the clock and playing at home, which is why I think they'll take this one close, 28-24. Illinois hosts Eastern Illinois at 9 o'clock with a pretty interesting spread at hand. I personally am not high on the Illini with some of the talent they lost to the NFL, as well as what they return. Eastern Illinois doesn't stand much of a chance in this game, but they force turnovers at a really high rate and bring back a veteran team that's done fairly well at the FCS level. I think they can give the Illini some early trouble, but ultimately I don't think they have the talent to keep up. I've got Illinois 35-13. Sacramento State at San Jose State is going to be on high alert for another FCS upset game. If you remember, Sacramento State took down Stanford last season and played very competitively against the best teams in the FCS, and this San Jose State team has some serious flaws, especially offensively. They're replacing a lot of talent on paper, and it looks like one of the worst offenses in the FBS. Nick Nash is a stud at receiver, but besides that, it looks pretty rough. I don't think this defense is truly that separated from the top FCS teams either, and because of that, I'm going to take the upset here in a nail-biter, 31-27 Sacramento State. Number 16 Oklahoma takes on Temple to kick off a small Friday slate, and this is a perfect matchup for Jackson Arnold to get some more game reps in with the offense, as Temple grades out as one of the worst teams in the FBS for me. They look super rough on both sides of the ball. I really like this Sooner team. They've got a rock-solid defense and a ton of weapons on the offense. I think they get going early and don't take the foot off the gas, taking this one 55-7 to kick off their first season in the SEC. The Jonathan Smith era at Michigan State begins Friday as they take on Florida Atlantic. Transfer quarterback Aiden Chiles set to take the over in this game, and it shot from around 42 up to 47.5. And I think for a good reason, as Michigan State has some really good talent on offense. Chiles is super young, but a couple of good backs, a good playmaking tight end, and a decent line that can help him make some early noise. I think the defense has some holes, but should be able to handle an FAU team replacing a ton of production. Give me MSU 31-16. Manny Diaz makes his Duke coaching debut against Elon of the FCS. And with all that Duke lost this offseason, this could be a real tough year one for Diaz to get through, and it starts with taking care of a much lesser opponent here. Texas transfer Malik Murphy will be the starter, and I like what he brings to the table quite a bit, but his offensive line and weapons are really unproven, so this could be a great opportunity for them. I think this line is a little low because of that, and I'm picking them to cover 37-10. Next up Friday night is Wisconsin and Western Michigan. Wisconsin has some newfound excitement this year after a strong offseason where they picked up Tyler Van Dyke from Miami and some nice defensive pieces. And I would absolutely love this Badger team this year if it wasn't for an incredibly brutal schedule. And knowing what lies ahead, I think they'll come out looking to get sharp as soon as possible. With the talent in the secondary, I would be surprised if Western has very much offensive success. I like the Badgers big, 38-10. TCU at Stanford is the final game of Friday night, and it could be a good one with two programs looking to bounce back from rough seasons a year ago. But the big difference to me is the roster improvement gap between these teams. TCU went out and loaded up in the portal, grabbing a ton of needs, and Stanford has a very similar team compared to 2023. Now that doesn't always matter, but I think there's a clear gap in offensive talent with TCU having the edge. I like Stanford's defense to keep them in this game, and winning on the road is always tough, but give me TCU here, 30-23. Number 1 Georgia will face number 14 Clemson in Atlanta Saturday in a matchup that could potentially be a preview of two playoff teams. Clemson returns a bunch of talent from a 9-win team last season, and Georgia's the preseason number 1 for a reason. Looking at how they match up, I'd give Georgia the edge pretty much everywhere besides defensive tackle and linebacker. In the past, we've seen what Georgia looks like when they're mad, and I think them missing the playoffs altogether is going to motivate them to come out super hungry to start the year. The turnover battle is going to be super important for Clemson's chances in this one, because as long as Beck and company take care of the football, I think they can win this game by multiple scores. I'm going to give this one to Georgia, 31-17. Number 8 Penn State at West Virginia could be one of the best games of the week, with a very underrated West Virginia team looking to avenge last season's loss. Penn State fans will hope to see Drew Eller be a much improved downfield passer, but the weapons really aren't there for him to me. I could definitely see them struggling early in this one, which will give the Mountaineers a real shot to pull off the upset, especially considering the talent level of Garrett Green and the offensive line. But ultimately, I think the talent depth allows Penn State to fight and escape a close one, 27-24. Iowa finally named Cade McNamara the starting quarterback again for the opener, but with his play last season and the continued lack of talent around him, we could definitely still see this quarterback battle continuing this season. But I expect him to perform fairly decent this week against Illinois State behind a strong offensive line and again a dominant defense that can take over the game. You may not find a better linebacker room in the country than Iowa, and they'll wreak havoc all game long. I think they win in usual fashion, 31-3. Virginia Tech has the Vanderbilt to kick off the season, and they've got some serious sleeper potential in the ACC with a fairly easy schedule and legitimate talent on the roster. Kyron Drones had a really strong 2023 and will look to improve on that this season, starting with a weak Vanderbilt team. Now, obviously, winning on the road is always tough, but I see a major talent gap in the trenches on both sides of the ball for Virginia Tech. They should be able to dominate the line of scrimmage on both ends and handle business to start the season right. I like the Hokies, 34-14. UConn at Maryland's an interesting game for me. UConn made some real strides this offseason, picking up an inexperienced but talented quarterback out of the portal in Nick Evers and loading up the receiver room. They improved the defense as well, but not to the same extent, which will be key for Maryland as they'll need to take advantage of their weapons in Hemby, Prather, and Felton and give them the ball as much as possible. Maryland's defense has a lot of returning production, especially at linebacker and safety, and I think ultimately the talent and balance will allow them to pull away, but I do think UConn is capable of keeping this one closer for a bit, so I'll go 30-13 Terps. Next is Pitt and Kent State in what could be a really ugly offensive game. Pitt is a clear-cut, more talented team, but in my opinion has a lot of question marks on the defense and an unnamed QB1, although it'll likely be Nate Yarnell. Outside of the safety room, I'm not high on this Pitt team, but luckily for them, Kent State is one of the worst teams in the FBS on both sides of the ball. I don't see Pitt scoring 30-plus often this season besides potentially this game, so if they give up some points here, I don't see a cover being that likely, so I've got a 31-10 final. Nico Iamaleava makes his 2024 debut as Tennessee hosts Chattanooga Saturday. This will obviously be a walk in the park for the Volunteers. It's just a matter of how much they'll win by. With Nico being pretty inexperienced outside of the bowl game, I can see them letting him go pretty deep into this game and throwing the ball quite a bit. As long as he takes care of the football, there's playmakers everywhere on the offense and a great offensive line. They should flirt with 50-plus and keep Chattanooga quiet. I'm going to go 48-6 for a final score. Ollie Gordon and number 17 Oklahoma State open up with a serious test up against the back-to-back FCS national champions South Dakota State Jackrabbits, who return the reigning Walter Payton Award winner at quarterback and maybe the best defender in the FCS at linebacker. The Jackrabbits haven't lost a game in their last 29, but haven't faced a team as talented as this one. The Oklahoma State offensive line is very experienced and should open up lanes for Ollie to run the ball in space. And I think the Cowboys defense has a chance to really slow down the Jackrabbit offense. Guys like Nick Martin and Colin Oliver will be really need to take this game over and not let them hang around very long. and I think they'll be able to do so, as I've got Oklahoma State pulling away late in this one, 34-20. Number 2 Ohio State starts the season against Akron, and as we all know, this is one of the most loaded rosters we've seen in some time. This could be the most lopsided game of the week, as the depth of this Buckeye team is strong enough to put up 70 if they feel like it, and it wouldn't shock me at all, but for a prediction, I'll go a bit lighter. Akron remains one of the bottom feeders of the MAC, so Ohio State may look to just burn some clock late. I've got a 59-3 final score. Number 4 Texas takes on Colorado State week 1 in a gear-up game for the Wolverines in week 2. There's an obvious disparity in talent level between these two teams, as Texas returned some elite talent and had a nice portal haul. But don't sleep on the Fowler-Nicolosi and Torrey Horton duo. They can compete with pretty much anyone, as we saw last season. And there's a real chance Texas is looking forward to that battle in Ann Arbor next week, or at least looking to hide the playbook and keep guys healthy. This game shouldn't be close or anything, but because of those factors, I think Colorado State can cover a pretty big spread here, as I'm going to go 45-17 Longhorns. Number 19, Miami will travel to Gainesville to take on the Florida Gators in what will be a serious test for both teams. Although slightly less important for Miami considering what the schedules look like this season for each squad. Personally, I believe Miami is simply a more talented team than Florida, but playing on the road is tough, especially when it's against a team with some legitimate talent and continuity like Florida has. If this game was played elsewhere, I'd probably side with Cam Ward and the Hurricanes, but I think there's a chance they struggle to mesh well early on, and Graham Mertz could impress at home, helping Florida pick up a much-needed win in the opener, 31-27. The Curt Cignetti era at Indiana begins with a home bout against FIU, a nice opportunity for the new Hoosiers to get a game action together. This team has a real shot to be a sleeper in the Big Ten this year, with a ton of solid transfers heading in, including Ohio's Curtis Work at quarterback and a slew of JMU guys. Looking at FIU, I think they're pretty underrated defensively, but the offense is a different story with some rough QB play and a terrible offensive line. Indiana should be able to dominate the trenches and control this game from start to finish, unless they're giving the ball away. I like them to take this one with ease, 34-10. True freshman Dylan Raiola make his Nebraska debut at quarterback Saturday against UTEP in what should be a great warm-up game before the Huskers take on Colorado next week. I think Nebraska will make an effort to get Raiola going quickly and keep him on the field to get as many reps as he can to help gear up for that matchup. And because of that aspect, combined with an elite Husker defense going up against a very weak UTEP offense, this should be a really lopsided score. I've got Nebraska big, 41-10. Eastern Michigan at UMass is a true toss-up game for me. Both of these teams look rough entering the season. I give a slight edge to EMU because I think the talent they added on the offense with Snyder, Mims, and Rooks is pretty solid combined with having a decent secondary. Playing on the road makes this a tough call, but because the home field advantage at UMass isn't great, I'm going to side with an experienced quarterback in Cole Snyder to play a clean football game. Give me EMU very close, 24-23. Iowa State kicks off 2024 against North Dakota, a top 25 FCS team, but they simply are not as talented as the FCS powerhouses who have a strong chance to win this week. It would take a pretty poor performance from the Cyclones for that to happen in my mind. Rocco Becht broke out last season and returns to lead this offense as a dynamic receiver room for him, and there aren't many secondaries better in the Big 12 this season. I like Iowa State to start off right with a dominating win, 42-10. Syracuse has a new look this season with new head coach Fran Brown bringing in a bunch of new talent. Ohio State transfer Kyle McCord will take the reins at quarterback, and his first test is the Ohio Bobcats, a much lesser Ohio team than previous seasons. I could see Syracuse struggling a bit with how much is new for this team, but McCord is a very solid quarterback, and they've got a big talent disparity on defense compared to Ohio's offense, which looks pretty abysmal. I think Q settles in at some point and takes this one comfortably, 34-13. Kennesaw State makes their FBS debut on the road week 1 against the UTSA Roadrunners. A pretty tough matchup for an opener, but nothing too crazy. This UTSA team does look pretty well rounded besides the quarterback spot to me, and Kennesaw State doesn't look like a team that's going to take the FBS by storm like a James Madison or Jacksonville State. However, they've got some continuity on the roster, and I think that'll help them stay in this game for a while. UTSA happens to just be the better team to me, and I've got them winning but not covering, 31-13. Northwestern had a really strong 2023 compared to expectations and returns a strong chunk of that group this season, and they'll kick off the year at their new temporary oceanfront facility against Miami, Ohio. This game, however, could be a really close one as the Red Hawk defense is one of the best in the MAC, and Northwestern has some serious quarterback concerns as we head into the season. If they struggle to put up points this game, it could head down to the wire, and I think that'll be the case, but Northwestern has the playmakers to stave off the upset late. I'm going to go 24-20 Wildcats. Boise State chose Maddox Magson at quarterback over former 5-star transfer Malachi Nelson last week, which came as a shock to some, and they'll open up the season on the road at Georgia Southern. Although they have a clear advantage with the run game, this matchup can't be taken lightly for Boise. Georgia Southern has a pretty decent defense for the Sun Belt, and I don't think this Boise team is as talented as years in the past. I think the dominance of Ashton Jeanty will be enough to win this game, maybe even comfortably, but I do think Georgia Southern gives them a fight. I've got Boise winning 30-20. Lenora Sellers makes his South Carolina debut as starting quarterback Saturday against Old Dominion, and honestly, I don't think this game ends up close at all. Old Dominion has some solid defensive players like Jason Henderson, but nothing that'll be able to really slow down South Carolina besides themselves. The Gamecocks bring a really talented defense with an elite interior defensive line and some standout safeties, and matched up against a very weak offense, I think they find a ton of success. I like South Carolina big, 38-13. Cal opens 2024 against UC Davis, looking to take a step forward after a 6-7 finish last season, and a lot of their success has been on the ground with star running back Jaden Ott, but they added some legit playmakers in Corey Dyches, Mikey Matthews, and Tobias Merriweather. This should be a solid offensive game for this group, regardless of who starts at quarterback, and although the defense isn't as strong as it could still be a solid unit with a strong linebacker room, I like Cal to control this one start to finish with a 41-14 final score. North Texas at South Alabama should be one of the better Group of 5 matchups in Week 1 as the teams match up very well to each other in my opinion. Both teams lost some valuable pieces and added a couple through the portal, and North Texas looks a bit more solid defensively than they were last season, which was a much needed improvement for them. With South Alabama getting this game at home, it's hard seeing them drop this one, although I think it'll be a nail-biter. I'm going to take the Jags 33-30 behind a really strong showing out of redshirt freshman quarterback Gio Lopez. Virginia hosts Richmond at 6 p.m. Saturday, and they just recently named Anthony Calandria the starter, which I think was the right decision. He showed some ability last season, although the numbers weren't great, and this is a solid opportunity for the offense to get off to the right start. I don't see this being a high-scoring team whatsoever this season, but I do like this defense quite a bit. Jonas Sanker is a stud at safety, and they should be able to have their way with Richmond's offense. I like Virginia to cover here 34-10. The Kalen DeBoer era is underway at Alabama as they take on Western Kentucky Saturday night. Jalen Milroe is back looking to contend for a Heisman Trophy and push for another playoff appearance. And while I do think this Alabama team has the pieces to get there this season, I'm not expecting them to dominate just right away with all the changes they went through this offseason. The corners are a big question mark to me, and it may take some time for the team to fully gel under the new coaching staff. But they should be able to beat Western Kentucky very comfortably. I'm just not going to take them to cover for those reasons, but give me Bama 41-13. Number 6, Ole Miss loaded up the defense through the portal and gave Jackson Dart a ton to work with as well, despite the loss of Quinshon Judkins this offseason. And they'll kick off 2024 at home against Furman. This should be another bloodbath type of game, as Furman just doesn't have the talent to really even compete with mid-level FBS teams, let alone a roster as stacked as Ole Miss. I like the Rebels to get things rolling early and take advantage of their playmakers often, kicking off the Dart hype train with a 56-6 win and a cover in Week 1. Arkansas State is an underrated team in the Sun Belt this season, and although it'll be a tough to beat the likes of App State, Texas State, and James Madison, Jalen Raynor is one of the best quarterbacks in the conference and will give him a real shot. They open up the season against Central Arkansas, and I'm including this game because I think the line's pretty light. I see Arkansas State win this game by double digits, unless the defense failed to improve this offseason, which could end up making things interesting, but give me the Red Wolves here 35-20. UNLV at Houston could be a really exciting game between my Mountain West favorites and the bottom dweller of the Big 12 this season. UNLV brings back one of the best receivers in college football in Ricky White and added Texas transfer Casey Kane. And at quarterback, Matthew Sluka has elite mobility that can make things really tough for opposing teams. And on the other side of the ball, I think UNLV can be really strong defensively. As for Houston, I love AJ Halsey at safety, and Donovan Smith can be really tough to stop at quarterback. But I just think this team lacks talent across the board and could lose this game against an arguably a better team. I can see it going either way, but I will take UNLV to pick up a nice win here on the road, 30-27. It took a long time for Sam Houston to pick up their first FBS win last season, but they got it and now kick off 2024 on the road against Rice. I think both of these teams improved this offseason, especially Rice, improving the offensive line and picking up Temple quarterback EJ Warner in the portal and retaining some solid talent on defense. Sam Houston has a solid receiving core, but a big question mark at quarterback with CMU transfer Jace Bauer and most likely getting that nod. I think they'll stay in this game for a bit, but Rice eventually has the strength to pull away late and win it by double digits. I'll go with a 31-17 final score. Nevada almost pulled a stunner Week 0 at home against SMU and now head to Troy in Week 1 looking to avenge that loss. And if they play anything like they did last week, they can absolutely win this game even on the road. This is not the same Troy team as previous years that could suffocate teams defensively and handle business on offense. I do still believe they are a bit better than Nevada, and Week 0 was a strong performance from them. But like I said, if Nevada plays similar to that first 3 quarters or so last week, they can win this game outright. But I am going to take Troy to survive this one, 23-20. Number 3, Oregon is chasing their first national title this season with a loaded roster full of elite portal pickups and returnees. Dylan Gabriel, Evan Stewart, Tez Johnson, Jordan James, and elite offensive line. This should be an incredible offense as usual this season, and the defense looks elite as well. They'll take on Idaho to kick off the year, and similar to Ohio State, I think this game has a chance to be the widest margin of the week. I'm going to take Oregon to cover a huge spread in this one, 59-7. Number 7, Notre Dame is on the road Week 1 at number 20, Texas A&M, and another potential game of the week. 2 very talented defenses going at it with some strong quarterback play as well. Riley Leonard makes his Notre Dame debut, and Connor Wegman has a lot of hype returning this season for A&M. Even though both teams have fairly talented offenses, I see this being a low-scoring defensive battle, Picking up Nick Scorton, Cassius Howell, BJ Mays, and Will Lee III was an incredible haul for the Aggies, and the same goes for Notre Dame, adding RJ Oben to an already star-studded group. I think this one stays tight from start to finish, coming down to the last possession, but A&M's crowd makes it too hard for Notre Dame to come out victorious on the road. Give me A&M 24-20. The reigning national champion Michigan Wolverines will kick off 2024 hosting a really solid Fresno State team. There is some very minor upset potential with this game, but with how strong Michigan's defense is, it would take a really rough game altogether. I'm expecting Alex Orji to be named starting quarterback for Michigan, and I think he can be a dynamic playmaker. We just need to see the ability to make reads and hit open targets to really assess the ceiling of this Michigan team. With Fresno being talented enough to hang around, and Michigan loving to kill clock and play to their strengths, I see Fresno covering this one, but a fairly comfortable Michigan win, 30-13. UCLA at Hawaii is one of my favorite picks of potential upsets this week, and personally, I really like this spread sitting at 2 touchdowns right now. Yes, UCLA is the more talented team of the two, and Hawaii did not look impressive whatsoever week 0, but already with the game under their belt and at home can be dangerous for a visiting team with some question marks. UCLA is not a particularly good team this season and need to win the turnover battle and control the trenches to hold off an upset bid. I do think they have the talent in those trenches to win this game, but it could be a close one. Give me the Bruins by just 10, 31-21. Kentucky is another team I think could be really interesting in the SEC this season with a dominant defense. They kick off 2024 at home against one of the worst teams in the FBS in Southern Miss. No more Frank Gore Jr. to rely on, and some serious offensive deficiencies. If Brock Vandagriff is any good for Kentucky, they've got the playmakers to make this offense viable, and a defense that matches up with some of the best in the entire country. I like Kentucky to win this one in a blowout, 41-6. Southern Illinois at BYU is another potential FCS upset bid to watch Saturday night, with the Salukis coming in number 10 in the FCS top 25. Now, obviously, BYU has better talent on both sides of the ball, but some big question marks. Quarterback is not a strong suit of this team, and I'm not a fan of either side of the trenches besides Tyler Batty at edge. If they let Southern Illinois hang around this game, it'll get interesting, but SIU is replacing a lot of production and will have a new quarterback at the helm this season. So ultimately, I'm taking BYU to stave off the upset, 27-17 at home. Georgia Tech pulled off an incredible upset win over top 10 Florida State in week 0 and heads back home to host Georgia State this week, where they'll look to pick up where they left off in Ireland. But as we know, it's pretty common to falter after a win as big as that, especially given the travel and lesser opponent at hand. I expect Georgia State to look to punch them in the mouth early and compete in this one, but I just don't see how they'll be able to hang around with Tech's offense for too long. There's just too much talent to drop with this one. I think they put together a strong second half and blow it open, 37-13 Georgia Tech. James Madison begins a new era after Cignetti left with a ton of baggage for Indiana. They kick off the season at Charlotte Saturday night, who will look to improve from last season's 3-9 record, and they'll have an opportunity to face a different James Madison team from last season to start off right. But don't sleep on JMU just because of what they lost. They still returned some solid pieces and had a really strong portal haul to reload their roster a bit. Ayo Adeyi is a fantastic running back, and I think this defense may still be the best of the Sun Belt. Charlotte is reportedly dealing with a ton of injuries to top it off, so I like JMU on the road by 2 scores, 34-20. Number 21, Arizona lost Jed Fisk to Washington this offseason, but new head coach Brent Brennan managed to keep a lot of the roster intact this offseason, including Noah Fida and Ted McMillan, arguably the best returning quarterback wide receiver duo in college football, as well as a pretty strong offensive line and an elite defense. I don't expect Arizona to miss a beat at all. If anything, they've got even better shot to make the playoffs this season now in the Big 12. New Mexico does have a game under their belt already and started off looking alright, but completely collapsed and lost to Montana State at home. This game will likely be much uglier. Give me the Wildcats to roll, 45-10. Wyoming at Arizona State is another tough game to dissect. A lot of unknowns for both teams with a young quarterback at the helm for the Sun Devils, as well as a completely revamped defense. Wyoming returns a ton of defensive production, but a new quarterback and a really unproven receiver room, and Harrison Whaley is sidelined with a knee injury. Because of that, my expectations are pretty low for this offense, even up against a below-average defense that hasn't played together much at all. If Sam Levitt comes out looking great for the Sun Devils, I think they'll cover the spread here. Regardless, I'm going to go with Arizona State, 30-20. Not many teams in the country replace more production than the Washington Huskies after losing nearly everyone to the NFL in the transfer portal after the departure of Kalen DeBoer for Alabama, and they hit the portal to replace all the depth they lost from the Exodus. Expectations should be pretty low for this group in Fish's first season, but I do like what he's building. I think they have some pieces to compete this season. Will Rogers, Jonah Coleman, Jeremiah Hunter, and a solid secondary will help them start off 1-0 up against an FCS Weber State who simply can't match them in talent. But I wouldn't be surprised to see some early struggles in this game, but I'll go with a 41-13 final score. Number 23 USC and number 13 LSU face off in Las Vegas Sunday night. A battle between two new starting quarterbacks after Caleb and Jaden went first and second in the NFL draft. Both Miller, Moss, and Garrett Nussmeier have played sparingly but looked excellent in their bowl game starts. USC completely rebuilt their defense this offseason, and it looks much better on paper, but results have to be seen on the field, and their first task is against arguably the best offensive line in the country. That advantage is enough for me to pick LSU in this game. It could be a close one and maybe higher scoring, but I think both defense have improved, so I'll go 34-27. Florida State laid an egg in front of everyone in Week 0's loss to Georgia Tech, and they badly need to bounce back Monday night against Boston College. I can see them playing a much sharper game against a weaker ACC opponent, but honestly, the issues I saw with this team are ones I don't know if can be fixed that quickly. A lack of chemistry and trust on offense doesn't change quick, and I think Thomas Castellanos is going to be able to run all over this FSU defensive line if they fail to get pressure again. I do believe Florida State can just out-talent them though, but I like BC to cover 31-17. That's it for my Week 1 picks. Let me know your thoughts, upset predictions, and which games you're most excited to watch this week down in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.